Hello Internet, I'm Chris Bird, I'm music editor of Total Guitar Magazine. I'm lucky to be sat here today with Steve Allsworth, who is a long-time contributor to TG. Hi Steve.
How you doing? All right.
Yeah, good man. Steve has been doing technical content for the mag for
far too long.
10, 15
long time.
Years, long time.
Yeah, something like that.
So Steve is our go-to guy when we have lots of difficult guitar playing to do. So he's here today and we're going to talk about technique, and we're going to try and address some of your technical difficulties. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is chicken picking. Now, I can't remember who sent that question in. Do you remember who sent the question in?
I can't remember his name. We can consult our list.
Let's consult our list. Our list says Andrew Reddy from Twitter has asked us about chicken picking, in particular in a metal context.
Yeah.
So
we're probably thinking sort of John 5, that type of...
I think, yeah, John 5 and Zakk Wylde kind of thing.
Yeah.
First of all, Steve, should we talk about the technique itself and like how to nail the basics of chicken picking? What's kind of...
I think probably the go-to technique is going to be hybrid picking. Mm-hmm. So really, generally speaking, I mean, you can use the little finger as well, but generally speaking, we're talking about using the pick and then alternating between these fingers here, so using the pick and fingers, so hybrid picking, so the two different techniques in one. So maybe we could look at perhaps a little bit of that and see how you can use it in a maybe in a country context first, and then perhaps how we can sort of mold that into more
metal,
of a
that's
metal
right.
type thing.
So let's
perhaps
literally start with the technique. So could you play like a really simple lick that just demonstrates what you're doing with your...
All right, so look,
well,
if we start off, maybe I can go through a few different things and then gradually work towards something that the readers can perhaps work on. So what we'll try and do, this is based on an E7 chord, right, or an E7. So all we're doing, playing a G sharp and a B, so we're picking that G sharp there, and then with the second finger there, the middle finger, we're just going to pick that B and then do a pull-off. It sounds a little bit weird by itself. It's that kind of Hendrix minor third, major third thing, but it's so we're just going to do a little pull-off thing. Really, that's it. So just picking that lower string there, and then using the middle finger, and then you can get these little alternating.
So that's literally just a down pick with your pick.
Exactly.
An upward like finger.
Down pick, middle finger, pull off. You can do it as triplets or whatever. It's just maybe it's a really basic idea just to get your fingers used to that kind of technique.
And that's something you might be able to move up and down the neck in different shapes.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can do that all over the place. I mean that in its simplest context, you can move that all over. You know, and you can just mess about on different strings and stuff as well. And the nice thing about using the open string as well, you get these sort of slightly outside sounds here and there. I mean, obviously you can do licks which follow a very specific chord progression, which I might do in a second. But certainly using loads of open strings, you can just shred basically for ages.
So we're talking about putting that into a heavy metal context. So I guess we might want to hear that over some sort of distorted backing. So
it's a funny one though. The thing is, I think when it comes to using country within a metal context, the two styles don't really go together. So the time certainly when I've heard it, it's usually a break, which is a country style lick, but not necessarily in a metal context. So there might be a little break.
You're almost saying there is no such thing.
No, almost.
Yeah, it's kind of like just country and metal collide rather than actually make something.
That's the thing.
Real.
I mean, it's not to say you can't do a fusion of the two styles, but certainly, I mean, my port of call always for any country stuff is going to be Albert Lee, but then you can go towards sort of more metal stuff, which is going to be, you're talking about Zakk Wylde, John 5, that type of thing, and they're really just utilize. It's kind of those licks, but maybe played with a little bit of distortion. Yeah, that type of thing. I mean, that old, the Zakk Wylde. It's all that. All those basic sort of Zakk Wylde things, they're all based on really, really simple country licks. And the same, again, if we're in G, that kind of thing. When you start to put distortion on there, and it's still based within that G, it's theoretically you could do that over your, kind of G5, And the thing is, the whole sort of chicken picking thing is that you want a bit of that palm muting. So if you just layer that with loads and loads of distortion, then you'll kind of lose that sense of that sound. That, to my mind, that's what I think of always. So, when you're doing basic stuff like that, so just for example, all I'm doing there is just go between the minor and the major third on a G chord. So we're going from B flat and D to B and D. So that's with those two fingers this time. So rather than using the middle finger on its own, it uses the middle and ring fingers. And then we just basically play the whole of that G major triad. And you can lay it across to that C over G. And you can just kind of fiddle around just with that really basic, and it's just using those two chord shapes. And if you put
your muting coming just from the pick hand?
Just from the right hand. No, it's all from the right hand. So if you can really, put more of it on there. So you're just bringing that palm in. That kind of thing. And that kind of gives you that sort of effect, really. And you can do that with those, the descending patterns that we had before. That shape we had before. If you put that into a chordal context, if we do, maybe I'm going a bit too far, but cycle chord progressions, so we're descending in fifths. So for example, if you go E, E7, A7, D7, G. This is a very, very common thing in country. It does a lot of these kind of backwards cycle chord progressions, and this is just kind of like a sort of Albert Lee style thing. And this time, rather than doing that on its own, we're just going to put the D in there on the top. So we're using two fingers there, middle and ring. And we're using that full E7 shape. So normally you play, it's a bit of an awkward shape. You would never do that.
I was about to ask you if it shows the full shape.
Right, you would never do that. It's horrible. But all we're actually doing is basing it on the major third. And that's that shape we had before. All we're doing is just extending that pattern just to make it into a chord shape.
Sure.
Keep those two fingers there, pull that finger off. And that'll happily sit over that E7. And again, you can use the palm muting to make it more of a chicken. And then if we descend through that chord progression that we had, A7 will be that shape. Again, this is probably a chord shape you wouldn't necessarily do.
Use it. It's quite an extreme shape, isn't it?
It's that one there, but again, we're not using from the root, we're just going from the flat 7. So we've got the flat 7, the root, and the major thirds. It's a bit unusual in itself, and this is what kind of makes it sound interesting.
Choosing smaller note groups then, that's making this a lot easier to do.
Yeah, and then you can just pull that first finger off. Chord, pull off. First shape, that'll be D7. Yeah? And then you can use your kind of, those kind of, type sort of G major.
That's great.
Type things. So you can kind of, that type of thing. A little bit messy at the end, but you get the idea.
Brilliant.
Right? So
that's great.
So maybe a few things to get on with.
Cool. Well, look out for that in the magazine, and hopefully that's good for you, Andrew.